County. This evening we're going to devote the first portion of this gathering to a presentation from our staff relative to the land use plan that the county and the town have worked together to formulate, which is a requirement of us by being a coastal community county. And we have been in the process for quite some time, which the staff will tell you about rather than me, because they know the details and I'm kind of sketchy. But anyway, welcome to all of you. Now I'll turn the meeting over to Chairman Smith to gavel his commissioners into order, and we'll proceed. Mr. Chairman.
Well, that goes better now. Thank you, Mayor Bone. It's always a pleasure to meet with you folks. I know y'all have some new guys on the board here that we haven't met with. It's good to see y'all here today. And at this time, I'd like to call the joint meeting with the Chilliwack County Board of Commissioners to order, and I will turn it back to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And again, on behalf of both governing bodies, we'd like to welcome the public to this meeting this afternoon, and we look forward to your comments. That being said, and in the interest of moving this process along, I will turn the meeting over to our staff, who will introduce the subject to us, and we'll have public comment. Okay.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Thank you all for being here tonight, and especially to all of you that were able to come to some of our open house hearing a little earlier this afternoon, and welcome to the members of the public that were here for that and those that are here for the hearing. We got some good information tonight gathered through that input process, and look forward to hearing some more input tonight from the public. And I'm going to turn over the presentation of our land use plan to our consultants with Code Right Planning. Kara Isherwood is going to be going over the presentation with you, and Chad Meadows is also here, and both will be available to answer any of your questions and kind of dialogue with you a little bit later. And so, Kara, just turn it to you.
All right, thank you so much. Everybody, thank you so much for having us here today. Chad and I live in Durham. This is one of my favorite communities to make the drive to on a beautiful afternoon. Thanks everybody for coming out. Whether you just got here, you've been here for an hour, that's awesome. As Elizabeth said, thank you so much. My name is Kara Isherwood. With me is Chad Meadows. He's the principal of Code Right Planners based out of Durham. And we have been contracted by the county and the town to assist staff with this update to your CAMA land use plan. I also want to recognize in the room with us tonight is Ms. Charlene Owens. She is your CRC district planner, which means that she is sort of here to shepherd us through the legal process of adopting the plan, making sure our data is all correct. Charlene is here. So tonight, oh, should I speak into the mic? Thank you. Sorry. To be still. So tonight, as you know, we're here to talk about the update to the 2008 CAMA land use plan that's currently in draft form. As I said, this is a joint project between the county and the town. Updated land use plans, it's no longer a requirement to update your plan every so many years. It is a requirement if you are a Coastal Area Management Act county or town, as you are. It is a requirement to maintain a plan. However, updates are just good governance, and we'll talk about why in just a moment. Very quickly, what land use planning is and what it isn't, because there's a lot of plans that go on in a forward-thinking community. What land use planning is first it looks at what are we right now. Let's analyze, what's on the ground, how are we growing, where are we developing. Then let's look to the future. Where do we want to go in terms of our land use, in terms of the way our community looks and feels. And then let's set some policies and build a future land use map that'll be a roadmap for how to get from where we are now to where we want to go. Also very importantly, your land use plan is the foundation of your jurisdiction's zoning code and zoning map. It's not either of those things. Those are law, which enact the policy contained in the plan. So what land use planning isn't, it's not comprehensive. Some jurisdictions do comprehensive planning that covers everything soup to nuts. School quality, education, safety, all really important things, but not part of a land use plan. So we try to zero in here on land use. And what this process is not, it's not rezoning, and this is not changing the development code. As I said, for either community, as I said, this is the policy foundation for future changes that may take place to help meet the goals in the plan. Again, state law doesn't require periodic updates, it just requires that you have a plan. That was a misstep on my part. But why is it just good governance to update your plan now? So your last plan, it's 10 years old, it was adopted in 2008. What happened in 2008, 2009? Great Recession, economy crash, housing bubble burst, we were all here. We now have a changed situation. The result of having a plan that was developed in economic boom times is that that plan assumes economic boom times will probably continue. The assumptions that were made in terms of population growth, land development, building boom, all of those things were turned upside down. And it's not your fault. It's no one's, well, it's someone's fault, but no one could have seen this coming. Every community who adopted a plan around that time is facing the same issue. But it's a good idea to update this, you know, knowing that those things have changed so dramatically. Also, a little bit of a picky point, but CAMA and the CRC have revised their rules to allow for more local emphasis in the plan and a little more autonomy over the way the plan is structured, how it looks, what's included, so that it can be a more day-to-day useful document beyond the technical things that are required to be included. A quick overview of how we've gotten to this point. We started this project back in October 2016. Chad and I came for a few days. We talked with staff, they took us on a tour. We met with elected officials, we met with stakeholders, just sort of got the lay of the land, literally and figuratively. Then we went even deeper into a land use survey because, as I said, the first thing you want to do is update the existing conditions. So we used several methods and updated the existing land use map just to see what the uses are on the ground today in the county and town. Then we moved into our public engagement strategy. This included three main components. The first was an open house that was held back in February 2017. It was held up at the county safety building. About 20 people came out. It was a lower turnout than we had hoped for, but we got really good input. And most importantly, the open house was a launch pad for the survey. We did an online and in-person, you could do it either way survey for the county and for the town. And in the survey, we were really asking people about those first two questions. Where are we now? And where should we try and go? You know, what's your vision for the future? In 20 years, if you were to come back to Edenton, or if you can look 20 years in the future, what would you like to see? Equally importantly, what should not change? What makes us who we are? What do we need to really protect and defend? So that was the subject of the survey. We got 310 responses, which was great. We were really excited. Our goal had been to get 200 responses, so we surpassed that. We're very excited about that. The third component to the public engagement as a follow-up, you know, as you do when you get 310 people giving their opinions, there were some conflicting opinions. There's different information. You know, some people wanted X, some people wanted Y. So we called a meeting with both of the two bodies who were here tonight. We had a joint work session in which we presented the survey results and we said, so what should we do from here? You know, we've listened to as many people as would fill out the survey. Now, elected officials, like, where should we go? What's our next step? If some of y'all were there, we would flash up questions. We used keypad clickers to sort of take the temperature of the folks at the table, and then we had a discussion. And this really helped us refine the goals and then the policies that were in the plan. And we were ready to move into drafting. So we spent a few months drafting the plan and then sent it off to Charlene Owens, district planner, for CRC review. We went through a couple of rounds of revisions with the CRC and finally ended up completing that review in February of this year. Right now we are in the, what's called on this chart, the adoption process. I do want to come out and say, in thinking about this schedule, we had envisioned that this plan would be ready to adopt tonight. And in the past couple weeks, over the period of public review, we've gotten some really good comments and some things that make us think we're not quite ready to adopt yet. We need to talk a little more, we need to think a little more, and we need to make sure that when we do eventually adopt the plan, it's the right plan for these two communities. So that's where we are right now. And then the last step after we adopt the plan, each jurisdiction will adopt it. We, the consultants, will deliver the final version of the plan. Later it will go to CRC for certification. So if you have or haven't seen the plan yet, this is the cover. It's available online currently. We also have copies here tonight for you to review if you need to. First I want to touch on a few changes from the 2008 plan. As I said, the economy, the conditions on the ground maybe didn't change so much, but the economy and national trends changed a lot. But also our understanding of what makes a really good plan changed. So these are some of the things that we heard from staff and from stakeholders when we were here on that first trip that we tried to address in this plan update. We heard that the plan could be organized a little better, that the pages could be more engaging or user-friendly, that it was hard sometimes for, people who were looking just for policy about the county or just for policy about the town to find what they needed. So we reorganized it. We're also big believers in implementation-focused plans. So you'll notice that this plan takes that tack and really says, what are the actions we need to do in the next 5, 10 at the outset years? We know we have a longer planning period. You always want to look at least 20 years in the future, but really, what's our next step? Please tell me, what can we do to get to that goal? And then again, as I said, realistic, given a 5-year time horizon. We're of the opinion, and staff and stakeholders agreed, that 4 goals that are more achievable far outweigh in value 62 goals that we're never going to get to, and then we're all just going to feel bad about why didn't we achieve our 62 goals. So we whittled it down to just a few local concern goals that the communities can focus on. So to go into those in a little more detail, this slide's a bit overwhelming, but I'll talk you through it. This is a recreation of the table of contents of the old plan, the 2008 plan. And this is the table of contents of the new, updated plan as it stands today in draft form. What I really want to call your attention to is the policy guidance. These are the things that the folks sitting up here on the dais are going to need to turn to very often to say, oh, you want to come for a rezoning? Is that in line with our policy? Let me flip and check. In the old plan, it was buried way down here. It was hard to get to. It was hard to find. Staff showed me their binders when we were first here. They were full of tabs. They were dog-eared. We moved it up to the front. We also shortened it and made it a little easier to read. We shifted some of this background data toward the back of the plan, and we also established some appendices that would hold some of it as well. So all of this just given toward, if we can't reduce the bulk of the plan necessarily, because it does have a lot of technical components, let's make it easier to find what we need. Likewise, this is a typical page layout from the old 2008 plan. This is a typical page layout from the updated draft plan. This plan is not horrible. It uses some tables. It uses some indentation and some nice size text. We tried to take it just another step further by using some color, adding a little bit more nesting of text. And we actually, I've never done this in a plan before, cut down on the number of tables that were in it. The previous plan had so many tables. It was wall-to-wall tables. Tables are a great way to organize information, but you don't need every piece of information in a table. So we made our tables more usable. We also added dynamic headers and footers so you can tell where you are in the document. Some key changes we made to the policy guidance. First, like I said, we worked hard to establish some county-specific and some town-specific policy guidance so that the staff, so that the citizens, developers, elected officials, appointed officials can turn to what they need easier. As I said, we also cut down the number of goals, made them more succinct, put the implementation plans into matrix form. I do want to note the CAMA required policy guidance on the more technical and environmental side is still labeled as shared, and it's located after the county and town policy guidance. It's very, very important information, but it is bulky and very data heavy, and it doesn't have as much to do with those 4 key goals that are really up front in people's minds. So it's just in a separate part of the plan close by. I wanted to highlight a change on each of the county and the town's future land use map, something that came out of discussion and study in the plan. This again is the old or 2008 plan, or the future land use map for the county. What I want to draw your attention to is that almost all this land is one color. It's residential agricultural. However, when we came to town, what we heard people saying, especially during that joint work session, was what we really need to do in the county is protect rural character. We want to protect rural character. Well, this sort of blanket, not zoning again, but blanket future land use doesn't go maybe far enough to protect that character, because it can lead to sort of hodgepodge development. It can lead to having too many houses along a roadway, and so you lose the pastoral views that are behind it. So what we're proposing to do, is to add this pink designation, which is the rural center designation. Working with staff, we identified 4 already existing sort of community crossroads, places in the county where people maybe go to shop or get gas or meat or buy bait or go to church, or where there's a higher population density than in the rest of this area. And we establish those as sort of, you can think of them almost as village centers. And what we're aiming for is to direct the most intense development into these areas to protect the rural character out here. There were very, very few changes, actually, to both future land use maps, but particularly to the town. There's one I want to highlight, which is on the old 2008, you can see this orange, is the downtown mixed use. One of the things that we heard, again, particularly at the work session, joint work session with you all, was we need more space for entrepreneurship and small businesses to take off downtown. We need more space where that's allowed. We have building stock. We have all these places. We need to reflect that in the map. So what we did, again, working with staff to find good delineations, was just expand that out a little bit down here to give a little more room where that mixed use entrepreneurship, maybe live work, truly, town center type uses could take hold. All right, now I want to step through the very high level policy guidance. This is again not the CAMA required policy guidance. These are going to be the jurisdiction specific policy guidance. Just going to go through the goals and then a couple of key implementation actions for each, just to give you a flavor. These are the goals, this should say county goals. The ones that we came up with based on all the feedback were promote economic development, provide recreation and open space, foster housing choice, and encourage population growth. A few of the action steps that are really important to this for the county, again, this is separate jurisdictions, is first and foremost, update the development ordinance. Like I said, this is a groundwork for doing that. We go into greater detail about, we don't just say update the development ordinance. We'll say in order to. A few of those main points in the plan are to establish those rural centers and encourage higher density development to locate there. To make sure that we allow cottage industries so that entrepreneurial activities can take place in rural areas. At the same time, to make sure those cottage industries, if they're heavy or disruptive, are appropriately screened and separated from neighbors. So there's a list of things that the development ordinance needs to be updated on for the county to implement this plan. Another key action item is for the county to update its open space inventory. This is a document that exists and goes through the open spaces of all types that are available. But we heard over and over again in the public engagement period that people either weren't aware of them or thought they needed to be improved in some way. Working with folks at the work session and through the stakeholder interviews, it became clear that while we do want to enhance our recreational opportunities, the choice was made for reasons of cost and maintenance and sustainability that we want to enhance what we already have in terms of recreational areas instead of buying more. So this is a step toward making sure we know what we have and we know what needs to be enhanced. Third and fourth, these are studies that need to, future studies that the county and the town should work with together. The first is a market study to identify growth areas. And I don't mean growth areas in terms of buildings and land. I mean growth areas in terms of industries that the county and town together could work to attract. The Edenton Show in Partnership does a phenomenal job already of building on the industries that are here. And we think that there's room for maybe some other industries, potentially healthcare, that would serve the population growth needs. So we do recommend undertaking a market study in partnership. And then we also recommend undertaking a population growth study. Population growth was one of the 4 main goals. This plan, again, is a land use plan. We can make some recommendations in terms of land use for how your land uses could be adjusted in order to encourage population growth. But population growth is not just a land use issue, as you know. There are lots of things that contribute to where people decide to live and where they decide to stay. So we recommend partnering together, as we know you do well, to undertake a study and then enact some strategies. Quickly, the town goals, these should look really familiar because they're the same as the county goals. This was not really expected, but was phenomenal to notice because, again, it enables you to work together toward these things. So they're promote economic development, provide recreation and open space, foster housing choice, and encourage population growth. The action steps, however, are very different because while the goals of the county and the town are the same, again, a really good thing, each jurisdiction is going to need to take different actions to realize these goals. So in the town, there are only some really minor revisions to the development ordinance needed, mostly having to do with some new housing type options and cottage industries and some sort of live work to encourage entrepreneurship. The town really wanted to have one of their action items be to undertake an entrepreneurship initiative to work on recruiting and retaining entrepreneurs to fill out some of that area in the downtown core and even beyond. And then 3rd and 4th, again, these are in partnership with the county, the market study to identify growth industries and population growth studies. That should have been in the 4th. So, as I mentioned before, we thought we were ready to adopt. We realized we weren't because a couple of issues have come up through great comments and people reading and really thinking hard. So I want to address a couple of those right now, and then I'm going to turn it back over to you all and the public to hear more. But I just want to set us up for things we've already heard. So one of the comments that we received was, this chart makes it look like we're going downhill. Population is crashing. It looks rather catastrophic. Just to orient you, the yellow are known data points. These are numbers that come from the US Census. And then the purple points are points that we projected out. So we can go into the data that goes into it. It all comes from the state and the census. The point is that some folks were concerned that this might send the wrong message to folks who were looking at this area as a place to live, as a place to grow, as a place to do business. Oh, I did want to say, it is required by CAMA, the CRC requires to do 30 years of population projections. So the first thing I want to talk about is, again, this is the same chart. These are known numbers. These are the projections that we completed. And then this is the North Carolina State Office of Budget and Management projection. You'll see that it goes also downhill and at an actually even sharper angle than the ones that we came up with and calculated. This is because we use different methodologies. Both are legitimate, but I just wanted to show that both of these are in play and that our method was slightly more optimistic. There's different information out right now about counties and growth. This was, the census just released some new estimations, so there's a lot of talk right now in local government circles crunching these numbers. This was an article called Are NC County Growth Populations or Patterns Shifting that was put out this week by the Carolina Population Center. And it shows that all the counties in dark blue, you guys are here, lost population between 2016 and 2017. And in fact, further in the text, it says that these counties have mostly lost population between 2010 and 2017 as well. So you're not alone. This is a theme. This is something that's happening in this area. On the other side, an article came out just this week from the Pew Charitable Trust saying that rural counties are making a comeback, that actually a lot of growth is happening in rural counties across the country. They're saying there's a steady improvement in the economy, there's housing that people can afford. It's the beginning of a return of population dispersal. And they include this handy map, so handy, that shows, the green counties are the ones that gain population. You can see these are in some rural areas. These are the mountains. This is the Pacific Northwest, pretty rural. The pink lost population, the red lost population. So let's zoom in. Chowan County lost population. Not as much as some of its neighbors, not as much as some of the other folks in the country, but they're also finding that Chowan County lost and is losing population. So now what? What do we do with this, right? We want to paint ourselves in a good light, but we also want to honor the data. And we want to be honest, and we want people to know that we're being transparent and we're looking at the situation and then making policies that are based on those data points. So in our quick thinking about this over the past week, we've come up with a few options. First is revise how the data is shown in the document, We can also take, when I listed those 4 goals, population growth was number 4 for each one. If it's really important for one or both jurisdictions, we can move it to number 1, no problem. We can devote more text in the plan to the things that are already happening that are aimed at growing the population. We can also go into greater detail on the action items that pertain to growth. We can do a better job linking some of the land use policies and goals and action items back to growth. So when I say option to reformat, what do I mean? This is the same exact graph, just with a couple of cosmetic changes. Numbers are not changed, they're the same. It shows the same thing. I think the dotted line sort of makes the point better that, hey, this is a projection, it could or could not happen. This is the exact same information, but it doesn't, look like a downhill curve. So these are some options. These are, again, just cosmetic. In terms of current initiatives that we are planning to add back into the language around population, there is a feasibility study undergoing for senior housing development. There is a strategic communication and marketing plan looking at reaching out to these 3 generations that we wanted to reach: families, retirees, mobile workers, entrepreneurs, millennials. The county's investing in the College of the Albemarle. There is just partnership after partnership happening here that is paving the way for growth, and the plan can do a better job of recognizing these things so that when people flip open to this section, that's what they'll see. Oh my goodness, there's more. The movie theater, the library, the TDA success. This is a big one. Recent industrial expansions, as I said, the partnership, phenomenal job. These are things that I think we cover a little bit in the plan, could be covered more and needs to be linked more to population growth. The growth strategy that is outlined in the plan talks about, I think this was a phrase that staff came up with, and I really liked it, 3 generations of population growth. Meaning, we don't want to have, we don't want to put all of our eggs in one basket. We don't want to just attract one type of person. To be a community, we need all sorts of people at different stages of life. So much. So, 3 generations of population growth refers to older folks, seniors, retirees. It refers to young families. And it refers to people who are being born staying here and younger folks just out of school moving here. A couple of things already in the plan that do explicitly talk about this. A big one, as I mentioned, is housing policy. The housing market has changed dramatically in the last 10 years. Folks who are my age, I was joking earlier that who would have known 10 years ago that millennials wanted to live in shipping containers? There are just new options nowadays, and also new options that are really old options. The live-work unit where, I could have my store and then I could live above it. That's an idea from the 1800s or even before, but people are really into it now. So we talk about housing policy and expanding the range of housing and where it could go in order to attract 3 generations. And then we also talk about improving employment options. And that's not just, I do want to say really quickly, that's not just we need industrial jobs or we need places where I can go to work. One thing that we talk about in the plan is the broadband initiative and providing services so that people who want to come here and be entrepreneurial can work from home. I work from home and I love it, and I could live anywhere in the country that I chose to based on the quality of life, which is what you have in spades. So making the community more ready to welcome sort of folks in the new economy. So that concludes our tour of the land use plan as it currently stands. There was one other issue that was brought up actually by staff that I wanted to cover quickly, and that was about these rural centers. This is our so-called problem area right here. I'm going to zoom in on it. So where we are, this is at the intersection of Cofield. Am I saying that correctly? Yes. Cofield and Virginia Road. We had a rural center designated there. So zoomed in, this is as designated. Staff came forward and said, "Did you miss it? It kind of seems like it should be here." So I want to open this up for discussion tonight to make this decision. We didn't miss it. This was an intentional choice. This is the area that was designated. It has the forestry department. There's at least one and I think maybe 2 churches here. There's an auto repair. And this is a pretty heavy concentration of population for the rest of the county. There's also the defunct, what is it, the Apple?
Yeah.
Red Apple, which I know isn't working right now, but could become, it's commercial property, so it exists here at this crossroads. However, this is also a great candidate. You know, we've got our Dollar General, our Red Box. There's some land here. This is obviously a major employment center that's not going anywhere. Thank you. Cia Perry is right here. So this is the one that was suggested. Again, you don't have to choose. You could have both. You could, staff and I were talking before, it may make sense to just connect them. If you look on the map, this one's actually really tiny compared to the 2 to the north. And again, these are areas where we want to encourage the most growth to happen in the county jurisdiction. So I just wanted to add that as an item for folks to comment on, is what should be done with this center. Again, what else needs to be adjusted or revised before the plan is ready for adoption? We don't have to answer that whole question tonight, but we are here tonight to hear about what needs to be revised, what needs to be reconsidered. Last thing I'll say, this is a draft schedule for moving forward after tonight. Obviously, we're right here considering the plan at 6 p.m. Again, a draft, this could be extended. Our plan as it sits right this minute, though, is for Chad and I, our consulting team, to go home after tonight and make some revisions over the next week or 2 based on what we're hearing tonight, based on what we heard in the open house. We're going to take our best stab at fixing the things that have been identified so far. We're going to produce a red line version, so with all the changes tracked, so everybody can see very transparently anything that changed. And then get that plan back to y'all by April the 7th. It can go online, it can be disseminated. We do have a pretty tight timeline in this draft plan for review. It's just a week, April 7th through 13th, where the public, elected officials, appointed officials, everyone would have a chance to review the plan and make public comments to staff by Friday the 13th at close of business. Staff would then get those back to us. We would talk about it, work with staff to see what other revisions need to be made. So a second round of revisions, a second red line document will come back, and then we could come back to town on April 23rd to the next meeting to have a hearing to consider the revised plan. This may not be enough time for review, and we're certainly open to that. There's no deadline, but this is the plan that has been discussed. That is all I have. Thank you so much. And I look forward to hearing what y'all have to say tonight.
Thank you very much, Kara. That's a lot of information, as we all know, and a very nice presentation, I might add. And we too look forward to hearing comments relative to, as I understand it, what you're clearly looking for from us tonight as an assembled group, both elected officials and members of the public at large. Focus on what items need to be revised and or reconsidered. Is that correct?
That is exactly correct.
Okay. I just want to make a little housekeeping sort of announcement that try to stay focused on what our purpose is here this evening, so that we can get as much back to you on those items that you want to consider for revision or reconsideration.
Thank you.
Is there anything else that you would like for me to add?
No, that's perfect. That's exactly right. Because again, our goal is to take this information and put it into an updated draft document.
Okay, okay. And, Mr. Chairman, if you would, on behalf of the commissioners, open the public hearing, I'll do the same for the town council, and we'll have these folks step forward and hear what you have to say.
At this time, I'll accept the motion to go into the public hearing,
So moved.
Have a motion, all in favor, raise your right hand.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all. Town council chair would entertain a motion to open this public hearing relative to the land use plan.
So moved. Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, both motions carried. We're now in the public comment portion of our meeting tonight. You will note in the agenda, the town of Edenton follows a policy whereby we limit comments to 3 minutes per speaker. But given the nature of what we're talking about here tonight and the focus being drawn on what needs to be revised and reconsidered, with the approval of the town council and also with the concurrence of the county commissioners, I would like to waive that. We're not overwhelmed with public here tonight, so I don't anticipate what this policy was structured to do. But I will remind you that we are listening and try to make comments, if you would, that are different from what you've already heard. Or if you've already heard a comment that's pertinent to what you would like to have heard, feel free to amplify it and reconfirm it. So with that being said, we will open the floor for public comment. And what we ask is that you take the podium and identify yourself, and we'll be happy to hear what you have for us. I have a public comment sign-up sheet. Bob Kirby will be the first to speak. Mr. Kirby.
Thank you.
And before he starts, if you hear anything that is either said or not said that you want to get into the record for this hearing, we will be happy to have you take the podium after those who have signed up, and we'll simply ask that you identify yourself. Yes, sir, Mr. Kirby.
Mayor and County Chairman, I have a handout I'd like to pass out, or ask you to pass out for me if you would. Make a few copies of this for you. See there. My name's Bob Kirby. I live at 236 White's Landing Road in Edenton, but it's in the county, Rocky Hop. I need to give you a little bit of background. I don't want to bore you too much, but I do need to give you a little bit of background. I am a civil engineer by training. Graduated in 1978 from the Virginia Military Institute. I've been registered as a professional engineer in Virginia for 34 years. A significant portion of my career was spent as a naval officer and a naval reserve officer in the Civil Engineer Corps. In the Navy Civil Engineer Corps, planning is what we're all about. It's what we do. I give you this so that you know I'm not just sitting here banging on something that I've read here. I've looked at this, I've looked at it very carefully. I believe that the Code Right folks have done an outstanding job of identifying the needs of the county and the town. My concern, as they say, is that the devil is in the details. page 3.1 makes reference that the county population has been falling since the 1980s. Maybe I'm reading the charts wrong or the graphs wrong. That's not borne out by figure 3, which shows growth through 2010. Again, I would like to make sure that this document ultimately is the best possible document for the county and for the town, so that a prospective businessman, business owner, individual even, who might want to be moving here could look at this and say, this Chowan County, this is an up-and-coming place, this is where I want to be, and not look at it and say, oh my goodness, I don't want to go there, population's falling, schools will be terrible, I don't want to come here to be a doctor at Chowan Hospital in a county where people are not going to be, or people are going to be declining. The paper that I just passed out to you, and excuse me, I need to back up. I, in preparation for my remarks, actually reviewed land use plans for the following counties: Bertie, Camden, Chowan, Currituck, Dare, Gates, Pasquotank, Perquimans, and Washington. Now I got to say this, Washington, if you go look on the CAMA site, Washington doesn't have a current land use plan. It's under review. But I looked at all of these land use plans, and what I was looking at specifically was population trends. Is this something that's specific to where we are in Chowan County, or is it something that's more global to the coastal community? The most interesting thing that I found is what I handed out just now, pulled directly from the Gates County Comprehensive Plan dated December the 5th, was approved by the CAMA folks in February of 2017, barely a year ago. And that plan has projections for population for our very own Chowan County. I like those projections a whole lot more as far as putting them in a plan that's going to be open to the public, that everybody's going to see, and everybody's going to be making decisions on. It shows Chowan County actually over the course of this duration with a negative 0.02% population. It shows it going down. I actually think that the projections are perhaps a bit pessimistic because I'm an optimist, but it's important to make note, there is already on the books in Raleigh a plan that was approved a year ago that shows Chowan population in a much more favorable light. And I would strongly urge you all to pursue including that information in our plan. Not to take away from the analysis and the cohort survival method that the people from CodeWright did. I understand that methodology. I understand why they did it, and I appreciate what they did. I am looking to try to help you all mitigate what's going on here. A little bit of this is self-serving too, by the way. I hope it's self-serving. I'm running for a county commission seat in the county, and if I'm successful, when I'm successful, I'm going to have to be the guy that makes or helps make this thing work. And I want it to work in a county where people are coming in and things are progressing. Let me see here. Let me double check my notes. Kara said, and correctly, that CAMA no longer requires an update. And then later she said, and I know she's saying what the rules say or whatever. However, 30 years of projection are required for population. So they don't require you to do it, I guess, but if you're doing it, you got to do it for 30 years, which I'm shaking my head here. And again, I think in a lot of ways, Raleigh's a whole lot like Washington, at least from where we sit. And she focused on it, and I agree with this. given a 5-year horizon, that's realistic, a 5-year horizon. They want us to project way out, but 5 years from now, what's going to be happening? Things are going to get a little bit better, hopefully a lot better. And then as you go farther and farther out, better still. The rural center designation, I just would like to suggest that we consider adding one. It's a smaller rural center designation. However, at the intersection of Rocky Hawk Road and Rocky Hawk Landing Road, right now we have there's a rescue squad garage there where they keep the ambulances, and there's a little deli there that does more business than I think just about anything else in that county. Jeff, you probably could attest to that. I think designating that might be a positive thing. There's a negative to that in that one of the properties on one of the corners there is a designated historic landmark. So that, I don't know if that gets into a concern for you all or not, but it's something to consider, please. I can't emphasize enough the rural cottage industries. I think it's great. I think it'd be great to encourage people to telecommute, bring us high-speed, affordable internet. I did all of my research on those 9 plans using a jetpack, and I think my cell bill is probably going to be about $350 this month. My concern again, we don't want to drive away development. We don't want to drive away potential doctors, attorneys, people who would love to live in this area, but are going to be shied away by what I perceive to be negative population information. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, sir, for your thoughtful comments. Next to speak from our sign-up sheet this evening is Mr. Larry McLaughlin there. And please remember, if any of you who did not sign up choose to speak, Larry finished with his comments. We'll open it back up for that purpose if anybody wants to.
Good evening, everybody. It's nice to be here, nice to have this opportunity. And there was nothing better to do on a blustery, windy day yesterday than to go through this plan. But I'm glad I did. There's a lot of good things in it that I think are positive for Chowan County. I like the concept of the 3 generations. I think that's something that makes sense. And in particular, planning ahead for a lot of older people and places for them to live. I think that would be smart. The different housing choices and types of development from single family to cluster and things like that to help preserve the farmland. Good idea. There were some things that I wanted to comment on, and maybe it needs some editing. I had this printed off, so it's easier for me to go through. But there's a map here. It's Figure 5, deficient bridges in Chowan County. And there's one with the number 12 on it. I believe that has been repaired. That is the one that goes over Queen Anne Creek as you're heading out of town on 32. I just thought you should make a note of that. I'll get to that. Another one from my pages is a 3-26. This is regarding pedestrians, sidewalks, and things like that. The following areas were identified as needing sidewalks. East Carteret Street from North Granville Street to 0.25 miles west on North Granville Street. I think you mean West Carteret Street. You want to check that. Right? And the one below it, East Freemason Street to 32 North. Double check that one as well. I think that is incorrect. I had nothing to do. That's not true. The other one is a, what they call the Eastern Connector. And it was taken off of the State Transportation Improvement Plan in 2011. And I'll read it. It is not currently funded within the 2016 to 2025 plan. What that was it went out from Hobbs Lane and then it curved back into 17. But, and here again, here's where I made, something that struck me was there was very little information about what the impact of I-87 will have on the county. And if you look at a map, if you want to get traffic from the eastern or southern part of the county up to 17 now, or future I-87, there probably is going to be a full-size intersection at, I guess what used to be called the 5 Mile Y. Right now it tees in, but that's going to have to change. So I think looking at the map with my eyes, that would preclude having to do this eastern extension. I wanted to make note of that. As well, on page 3-25, I think there's a mistake. It says NC 94 extension / Western Connector, and it's connecting Dr. Martin Luther King Avenue. And the one below it is Luke Street, and that talks about the Hobbs Lane thing. So I think you got that backwards. Elizabeth, you following?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's just a mistake. You need to flip-flop that. All right. Well, this is one of the things that bothers me in this regard. The plan was really good about identifying the rural character and preserving agricultural farmland, which, you know, is very important to me. So I'm reading on page 2-9, agricultural residential in terms of the A1 district. Okay? So this is what it says. In the agricultural residential classification, these are some of the things that are permitted. Some low-intensity commercial uses can be accommodated in the agricultural residential classification. Public and institutional uses, such as churches, county parks, schools, golf courses, and utilities. That hit me right in the face, all right? Because agriculture and residential, I get that. Utilities, I know what they are, but they're incompatible with agriculture and residential. And I think that needs to be seriously looked at. The other thing is, there was very little mention in the plan about solar and wind and what impact that would have on the county, what impact that would have on our agricultural and rural character, and what it might have on population. And so in those regards, it's somewhat deficient in that I-87, future I-87, all right, is going to bring a lot more traffic. And that's really what brings people. And when people come, businesses follow and commercial activity begins. And residential as well as business. As far as planning goes, it's interesting. I read a book recently by Robert D. Kaplan, and it's I think it was published in 2017, so it's current. And I really liked it. This guy, he writes for the Harper's and the New Yorker and the Atlantic and all these things. He does a lot of travelogue stuff. It was about traveling across the United States. I really enjoyed it. Talked about all kinds of cities. And so I was cleaning out my bookcase and I found a book. I had a book by Robert D. Kaplan. I said, ooh, great, I'm going to read it. Well, it was written in 1998, and in 1998, he's going through St. Louis, then he went out to Kansas City, then he went out to Omaha, Nebraska, and he's writing about these towns and the development. What he's saying is, the trend in 1998 was people were still going out to the suburbs. Towns were expanding. The inner cities were decaying. And he was saying that this trend will probably continue forever because this is the American way. Well, 20 years later, my kids and millions of others are all going to the city. All right? So, is it possible in 20 years they'll all say, enough of this, I'm going back to Dad's place, you know? You don't know. It's very hard to predict these sort of things. So when you project out, I don't know, I forget how far out it was, you know, I don't know how credible that is. And thanks for letting me share my comments.
Thank you for your comment. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak now, since our two sign-up speakers have made their remarks? Be happy to hear from you. Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, members of the Town Council, Mr. Chairman, members of the County Commission. I am Jerry Clamer. I live at 100 Hardee's Hill Lane, which makes me a resident of the county. Almost within throwing distance of the town, but I'm still a member of the county. I will not be redundant in covering some of the points that I've just heard, most of which I agree. I will say, Larry, you did get into a few more weeds than I was able to get into, but I'm sure that'll be beneficial. I've asked that a piece of paper be sent out to, distributed to you to talk about 2 or 3 different things. One that has been referenced many times here is the fact that CAMA has certain rules about what needs to be included in this. Particularly the fact that it needs to be a 30-year projection and that you need to use as a baseline. You'll see it bolded here as the top item. I think it's under A1. The last 2 decennial census. And then there's a chart I had created using that data, and of course, I may well have goofed it up. It's been a long time since I did some of this. But there's a chart on the left-hand side that shows what happens if you look at just 2000 and 2010. It obviously shows an uphill or an increased population. The next line on that CAMA data about what they say it needs to be included is the current, permanent, and seasonal population estimates. The key word there is the word estimate. On the right-hand chart, I tried to illustrate the problem that estimates create for small communities. The data points on that chart are taken from all of the estimates taken before the 2000 census, the last estimate before the 2000 census, the 2000 census, all of the estimates made annually by the Census Bureau to the 2010 census and the one after, right before the 2010. You can see how volatile that data is. There's real significant problems when you start using estimate data in a very small community. And I can say this partially because the fact that I was there working in the Congress when this whole estimate business was created. It was created for a simple purpose. The Johnson Great Society days had been created, and as a result there were economic development commissions created throughout the country. They were doing a lot to both attract people and to shove people into urban areas. Meant that if you only had 2 data points, one census and another 10 years later, you could in the first one find out that you had a whole lot of rich people or poor people, didn't really matter which, but you could have a whole lot of one or the other. Over the next 10 years, much of those people changed where they were because mobility was much, much higher in this country during that time frame. What happened was that the money, which was associated with most federal programs, didn't move when they moved. So in some cases, the community was getting overcompensated, had more money allocated for their need. Others, people had a higher need that they weren't getting compensated for. So the whole idea was to create estimates as a way to modify some of that volatility. In large numbers, it works reasonably well. But if you look beneath the charts, I quote there from ESRI, one of the, I think, highly respected groups that does this kind of analysis. Those 2 paragraphs basically tell you they don't trust estimates at all. Now, you'll notice, going back to the plan that was presented here to you tonight, there's reference to the cohort survival method as a way of doing the estimating. Now, it probably is, as was illustrated, I think, by some of the charts up here about what could have been if we'd used the state's data. It probably was a more optimistic piece of data than using the estimates that came from the Census Bureau. The problem is, it still has volatility in it. It is still highly skewed by their demographics. It relies on births, deaths, and migration. Now, if anyone in this room can tell me how you reliably track migration in and out of Chowan County, you're way ahead of any data I've been able to find. Well, my point is that all of this is creating so much uncertainty. It seems to me that the only reliable way that this document can be presented will be to go back either the 2 previous decennial census, or maybe even further, and then project forward. I have no idea whether Kim will have a heart attack over that suggestion or not. But I would say in the final point that 2017 data, which was again being shown up here, is a whole lot different than 2015, and it's also different from the previous years. So there's an enormous amount of volatility in this data. This is relevant to the future of this community. If this data exists as a confirmed public policy document, we're out trying to recruit grocery stores, we're trying to recruit industrial places. They're not going to be very interested in a community that has self-proclaimed to be declining. So I really encourage you to take the take the calendar that was presented up here, stretch it a whole lot more. I would say give 30 days before any rewrite's done, then give at least 30 to 60 days for people to look at it after the rewrite is done. I admire both the work these folks have been doing and feel sorry for them, because I know, having again taught members of Congress how to use polling data and what the horrors are if you have really small samples and so forth, I know the volatility is a big, big issue. And so I would conclude by, again, encouraging you to not only delay the action, which seems to be the plan, but to stretch out this process. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else that would like to have their voice heard on this matter? If not, we'll move toward closing the public comment session of this meeting and move on to deliberation, keeping in mind that we have already learned and that we will not be taking affirmative action or action of any sort on the plan as it's now before us in the draft form. So there will be more work done, rewrites and so forth. So,
Can I just, Mayor,
yes, ma'am.
then we may just want to recess the public hearing, and then when you debate, decide if you close it, then we might have to go through the, which we will re-advertise, but CAMA has a whole different advertising process.
Okay. Well, given that, is it the prerogative of the chairman and me to just declare a recess? I think it is, in my recollection of our rules. Okay, Mr. Chairman, I yield to your group.
I will declare a recess of the public hearing on the land use plan. And do we have to have a date or anything, or can the date be decided later?
We recommend that you try to pin down a date. You don't have to use the date that was,
Right.
put forward tonight. We looked at the calendar, there are, dates in May or June.
I'm looking for guidance on the date. I would think it would certainly need to be sometime in May or maybe June. I think next week is, 2 weeks from now is too early.
Yes, sir. I think from what I heard, there is no suspense that you have, that we do have the leeway to have some extra time. Then I would speak.
The calendar they mentioned talked about June 2017. Hopefully it's when the draft plan would be adopted. We could pick, since this is a Monday, say, third Monday of June to reconvene or to recess and see what.
One thing we need to think about, and I don't know what the time schedule is, but June is our budget month, and we're gonna be in budget meeting is deliberating a whole lot. If we're gonna go into June, we may need to go into July.
Does the Camel law require that we specify a date as opposed to a ballpark like a month and year?
In that they had time.
That's for the recess, that's because of the recess.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to look beyond June, given that that is budget adoption, budget hearings of July the 4th, the council meets on the 4th Monday of July, which is July 23rd, or the commissioners, I believe you all meet on the 3rd Monday? No?
Yes, that's right.
They meet, but I'll be out.
Oh. So is the 23rd okay? Does that make sense?
Which month we in now?
July 23rd? No?
Yeah, it works for me if it works for you.
Don't let us drive this.
This is your thing.
Yeah.
Well, then, that being said, I will recess the Board of Commissioners' public hearing on the land use plan till July 23rd, is that what you said?
Yes.
At 6 o'clock?
6 o'clock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and following suit, I will request the town council portion of this joint session to reconvene on July the 23rd at 6 p.m. in this same space.
One other thing, do we need to meet here? I think we need to put a location in this. Oh, did he? I'm sorry.
He said here.
Okay, we now have declared a recess. We have reset a date, a time, and a place. So I believe as far as our ability to carry forward with this conversation, we'll have to wait to that time. And in the meantime, we will be in close contact with our consultants and advisors on the project. Thanks again for your hard work and participation. Thanks again to those members of the public who came forward and offered very thoughtful suggestions and considerations for the team to evaluate. Thank you to the county commissioners for joining us here in our chambers tonight for this joint event. And we look forward to seeing you back here with us in July. So with nothing further to do on the subject of the land use plan, I'll declare a 5-minute recess, and then the town council will reconvene to complete our agenda for this evening. and you're all welcome to stay, unless you have something.
We'd like to thank you.
It's okay. It's okay. Don't worry about it.
Okay, I declare the recess over, and we're back to working on our regularly scheduled meeting, which is our committee meeting for the month of April. March, I'm sorry. I want April to get here, but this one did. So, with that, I gotta find, bear with me a second, I'll pull up this agenda.
I hope you can. I don't want to pull up.
I got that. Here we go. We have three committees that are going to meet this evening. That would be our administrative committee, followed by public works, and finally finance. So I'd ask Councilman Biggs, as chairman of the administrative committee, to do your thing.
Yes, sir, Mayor. Well, just about time your computer came up, mine died, so, that's all right. We only have 2 items on, the agenda for the administrative committee tonight, and, one of them is, Anne Marie wanted us to talk about what we, want to do with the second floor space above Town Hall. It's my understanding, Anne Marie, and I don't have it in front of me now, but you have a couple of, or Jennifer has a couple of small businesses that are looking to possibly go up there. I don't know if you want to tell us who they are. They might not want us to know, and that's fine too. But if you got some more information that you want to relay to us that we can think about between now and April 10, I think it is.
Yes, okay, be happy to. And they are existing businesses that their landlords are changing the terms of the lease, and so
Okay.
they have to leave.
Excuse me.
And I've talked to Mallory Denham, our economic developer. I also asked Wynn Dale for some feedback, and Tim Ivy, and Jennifer Harris, of course. You know, we've been holding out, trying to lease that space for many, many years to one big tenant. And unfortunately, that did not work out with SMA. But the space is beautiful, it's renovated, it's accessible now with the elevator. And I asked Mallory and Wynn and Jennifer, you know, do you think we should continue to try to hold out for this one tenant that would create, you know, bring a lot of jobs and just rent the space to one entity, or should we look at breaking this space up? Because periodically over the last few years, we have had inquiries about 1 or 2 offices. And, you know, there are ups and downs to both sides. Mallory is working hard on targeting some specific industries, looking at the logistics, transportation industry. And Mallory, what was the other sector you were looking at?
They're all primarily third-party billing, third-party logistics, etc.
But, you know, we hope that works out. In the meantime, do you want to look at perhaps renting, you know, individual offices, and then if we were to land something larger, they could, you know, take over the remaining space? It's a lot to think about, you know, because you kind of losing the option of, wow, what if somebody big wanted to come up there? I did hear this weekend about another existing business that may be interested in a couple spaces. So I feel like if you want to go with renting on individual offices, I think there'd be more. We might not fill all the space, but you might get 3, 4, maybe 5 offices, and then start generating some income, some rent.
I know you put a blueprint of the, you know, the second floor in our packet, but let me make a suggestion, possibly that would help. I'm a visual kind of person. I'd like to make a suggestion that all of us, if you have not been upstairs and looked at this office, go do so. And maybe that'll help you decide, can people work here and another company work here and another work here, or what we'll have to do to make that work, number one. And number two, certainly I'd love to have the one company come in and say, I'd like to take it off. You don't want, and I know this is tough, you hate to put limitations on somebody that's moving now that really doesn't want to move, and you say, okay, if we have a company that comes in, you got to go, and you really don't want to do that, but you hate to turn down a company that might bring in 30 jobs too, that, where we're sitting there with 3 or 4 jobs.
How long has this been available, the space?
It's actually just become available.
Okay.
I mean, within the last month.
Because we were holding out for the other place that we thought was coming. And that's what it was refurbished for, was for the other company. And they flew the coop.
May I make a comment?
Yes, sir, absolutely.
I like your thought for a walkthrough for us. And I also think another pertinent piece of information would be to take what square footage rentals valuations are in this community and apply it to this space. So we would also have, do you want to chop it up into X number of smaller spaces, and we're all familiar with what risk we'd be running as far as landing a bigger tenant if we do that. But I think it would be another good piece of general information just to figure out what the valuation is in terms of rental income before we start chopping it up into small sections.
And I do want to just say for the record, we received a grant from Golden Leaf, and that basically paid for the elevator. There were no clawback provisions, there were no requirements for us to repay that grant. However, they did ask that we try to lease it to businesses that were going to create new jobs. They said, we can't hold you to that, but that's what we would like you to do.
Right.
And certainly, the 2 clients that we have now would not meet that qualification, but there's an existing business that may be interested, that needs more space for more jobs. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure you were aware of that.
I noticed that you talked about, you didn't want to be in competition with private industry, but are you getting any feedback from the private industry about what are y'all doing? Okay. I had someone even mention this weekend, the possibility y'all could turn that into housings. We're always trying to make an effort to put people downtown. Well, I think we made some suggestions. Maybe we can come up as a full council at the April 10 meeting. Maybe we can get the information that the mayor was talking about as to, do we really want to cut it up with that small amount of money?
In the meantime, we can visit.
Sure.
Yeah, I would encourage you to do that. If you're a visual person like me.
How about, Steve, also cost, what the town's cost is of keeping the power running up there? Heat and air and electric, unless that's gonna be part of the terms and conditions of future rent, might include, the payment of utilities. But anyway.
Yeah, because I can't imagine if it's 2 small businesses that they can afford the heat and air,
No.
that whole building.
No, that to me, you'd have to prorate the whole
Right.
space.
And we can't afford to
So much per
have
square foot.
all that extra space that just heating and air running up there. How many units are there? Or how many?
HVAC units?
Uh-huh.
I'm not sure. It is, upstairs is on a separate meter, but I think there's two thermostats, one on
Mhm.
sort of the far end and so I'm assuming there are 2 units, but I'll find out.
So the 3 conference rooms, about six to 8 offices.
Looks like it, yeah.
Yeah.
2 restrooms. It's a nice space with a general reception area as well. Okay.
Craig, you good sending that on
Yes, sir.
under that
Sir,
recommendation?
Send it on.
All right. And the second item we have tonight is just, pardon me, please, was a follow-up on the Airbnb. As you know, we discussed a few months ago about the Airbnbs, and one of my concerns is and always will be safety. You know, when somebody has a rental house, they have to have a fire inspection done on it, and you know, we make sure that they have smoke detectors, and you make sure there's a second door they can go out of that's not blocked, and you know, just the little things, and that was the reason that I brought this up.
Steve, we're talking about an annual fire inspection.
I mean, that's what I'd like to see. Of course, as Anne Marie mentions, you know, we can't actually do a license anymore, or permits, I guess, for lack of better terms, which is sad. But, you know, I just think if we're gonna have people coming into Edenton, spend the night, spend their money, it reflects on us that they be in a
Did
safe
we come up with a
environment.
number of Airbnbs in the area? Did I hear 30? Was that somewhere in that area?
I don't remember, I'm sure they're probably all,
Does that sound right? That's about right.
yeah.
This would take some time on fire departments.
And it's not, you know, it's not something that you wouldn't want, I don't think, you know, if, we just saw where, unfortunately, a family in Mexico that lived here in the United States died from toxic fumes, you know. Maybe I play too far on the side of safety sometimes, but I saw too many fires when I was fighting
I don't
fire.
think it's any
too many
big
things, but
inconvenience for
I think
Airbnb owners.
we need to somehow set a guideline of carbon monoxide and fire, and I mean, I think it ought to just be part of it. And that's just one man's opinion. Those pieces of equipment or apparatus are not that expensive anymore. They've come down in price tremendously. That's just some things that I would certainly like to see to make sure that they're installed in our fire department or whomever.
As a minimum, yes.
As a minimum.
I read the blog that the gal had in our pack. Pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Yes.
Everybody is approaching it from every angle imaginable, but nobody has any firm policies yet. It doesn't seem like.
But the B&Bs themselves have to go through a rigorous inspection.
Well, if you all are amenable, what I think staff would like at this point is, number one, you know, through the School of Government, we got the nod that they believe that the municipality can adopt a regulation to require Airbnbs to have an inspection for smoke detectors. I didn't ask about carbon monoxide, but I'm assuming that would fall in the same requirement. And that we also learned through the School of Government that some sort of registration program is allowed, and I think we would need, if the council or the committee directs us, we would ask Hood Ellis then to draft an ordinance for you to consider that would require those regulations. And the registration would help us from a zoning standpoint, not zoning, because we won't be able to regulate it, but it would help us then to be able to notify the tax office that a residential dwelling unit is being used for a business, and then the tax office would be able to make sure that the personal property that's being used for the Airbnb would be taxed as a business. So I think those two things address, or those three things address the concerns that you asked us to research when we first brought this up a few months ago. And if you're okay, I think the next step again would be to get Hood to draft something for you.
What about occupancy tax? Because that all goes to TDA, and we need to keep funding that as best we can. This would be an added source of revenue
Yes.
for TDA's budget.
Hasn't that been one of the big discussions in Wake County or the city of Raleigh? Am I right, Elizabeth? And I don't know that they have ever settled on that yet,
They
have they?
haven't settled. It's
Yeah.
like the mayor said, they're still trying to figure out what to do,
Yeah.
or what they want to do.
But I certainly like that. I mean, you know,
Dale County has a model, I know, because back when we used to rent our house, we had to fill out this little form and send it in along with the check as whatever the percentage was of the rent that was charged. You had to declare on your filing every year whether or not the property was going to be rented, if so, when.
The air, and I'm using the company name, but
Right,
there
right.
really there are many companies now that offer the sharing economy for residences, but my understanding is that Airbnb does charge they pay the occupancy tax.
Yeah, that's
But what I'm hearing you say is that as part of the registration, we want to make sure that the county tax office is notified as well, so that they can make sure that the other businesses are paying the occupancy tax. So.
and I want to tell y'all, I just picked one that I went on, which happens to be Malcolm's out here. So I'm not promoting Malcolm, but in one sense I am. And if you've never been on, you need to go and look at it.
It's interesting.
There is not a single person on there that didn't like everything that they did.
That's right.
I mean, he gets 5 stars every time. Every time.
Larry Sellers, too. Larry Sellers.
Oh, okay. I didn't go on that one, but I just happened to hit on it.
Add him to the list. We didn't know about that.
Okay. So, Craig, you good with sending that on to full council as is? All right, Mayor, we're done then.
thank you very much. Public Works, Councilman Stallings, please, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. We only have one item on there tonight, and I may have to get Anne Marie to help me with this a little bit. I'm sure all of you have saw the articles in the Daily Advance and the Virginia Pilot about the recent articles about our Harbor Town projects, and it's a little ambitious where they are, this guy, what's his name, Mr. Ditto, Dr. Ditto, is proposing that we buy several ferries and ferry people from Kitty Hawk to Edenton and Elizabeth City and Hertford and this type of thing. And Anne Marie was recommending that we invite Dr. Ditto, who's the author of that study, to come down and talk to us about it. Anne Marie, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, well, thank you. I think it's a tremendously exciting project. I think if it all came together, if the stars were aligned and the funding was identified, it could really transform the harbor towns in northeastern North Carolina. And my sense is this has been around for many, many years. The last couple of years, Nick, the professor, has worked really, really hard fine-tuning it. And unless somebody like us steps up and says, you know what, we need to fight for this funding, we need to find a way to find, investors, to find money to make this happen, it's not going to happen. They need some advocates. I think there's different groups that are starting to say, you know what, let's really join together and fight for this. I don't want to go out there and start promoting it unless you all are behind it. But I think the time is right. I saw where he went before the General Assembly Program Evaluation Committee today and presented it to the General Assembly. You know, everybody talks about Golden Leaf. The pot of money that all the northeastern counties are competing for this round is not gonna work for the ferries. The projects are already being formulated. The counties are too far in their development of other projects. But that's not to say that persuasion can't be put upon Golden Leaf to look at it. It's only but it's $13 million. You know, Golden Leaf has what, Steve, $850 million in their endowment. And you look at, we saw a presentation recently of, and I love Golden Leaf. They're terrific. They've done wonderful things all over the state. But we need a mega project in our region, and maybe this can be our mini mega project. So if you all are okay, I think inviting Nick here and inviting the stakeholders from our county, and if you know some of the surrounding counties that are interested want to come and hear it, I think that would be the next logical step to try to make something happen.
You're looking at 5 high-speed ferries, we can reach the 5 high-speed.
Ultimately, yeah. But I think they're talking about one high speed originally, and then.
That was the goal, was 5 overall.
Overall.
Well, if you and Nancy get behind it, there's no doubt in my mind that y'all can make it happen.
And they were looking at Windsor too and Williamston in the big group.
And let me also say that, if I'm not bad mistaken, you might have heard this before too, Anne Marie, that, you know, the ferry division right now is putting together a high-speed ferry that will run from Hatteras to in Silver Lake and Ocracoke. And part of that was that they were going to have 2 of them. And then during the off-season, they would like to run one from Manio all the way to Edenton, which stops along the way, maybe Elizabeth City in here. So, you know, certainly not pouring any water on Nick's work, because he has worked extremely hard, and I'd love to see that. But I hope we don't run into any conflict with DOT, and I don't know if y'all have been fighting that, Nancy, or any of that has come up.
Nick's presentation, the ferry division, some of those saw when he was here, and I think they thought it was a good project as well.
Okay.
So I think there could be some cooperative, with the way I see it.
Perfect.
Is that appropriation Act from the General Assembly just out of the realm of reality?
Oh, no.
Okay. Just one.
The interbanks proposal is for passenger only, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's what the high-speed ferry going to Ocracoke is.
Same thing?
Same
Okay.
thing, passenger only.
Okay.
Passenger and bicycles.
And one more comment, if I might, Mr. Chairman. Anne Marie touched on it, but we are challenged in a big way virtually every day in the Northeast to do a project that would draw the region together more closely. And this could be the catalyst or the cornerstone of a lot of future development if we could get this thing up and running. We talked in the past about water quality and building an osmosis plant together, and that was back then something like $25 million, if I recall. This is much more affordable, and it being in the realm of travel and tourism, I mean, it's a lot easier to sell than turning bad water into good. But, I think anyway. But no, I'd love to hear the presentation myself.
Well, if that's okay with their pool, if that's okay with you, we'll send that to full council.
It's okay.
That's all we have, Mayor.
Thank you, sir. And Councilman Dixon is away in New York with the National Main Street Program, and he's taken as his guest our own Jennifer Harris from the Edenton Main Street Program, Destination Downtown, so it'll be fun and interesting to hear what they bring back from that trip. So in his absence, Anne Marie, would you explain the grant agreement with Regulator Marine, please?
Sure. Happy to. As the council knows, we applied for and we received $320,000 grant from the North Carolina Department of Commerce. It is for the building reuse program, and Regulator Marine, you heard from them when they attended your meeting back in the fall, when we were looking for permission to submit the grant application. They're proposing to create 32 new jobs. Their baseline for job creation started back in December. They had 155 employees on the payroll at that point, and going forward, they've pledged to create 32 new jobs. Their investment was over $6 million in terms of building and equipment. The grant requires a 5% cash match, and I wish that the commissioners were still here because I could give a shout out to Kevin. Kevin and I asked the Edenton Show-On Partnership to pay for the cash match because that was so much more money than, this would be the highest grant that we've ever gotten from Commerce, and the partnership agreed to fund the match. What we're asking the council to consider approving is the actual grant agreement, and then there's also 3 agreements that the regulator and or the property owner would have to pay for, not pay for, but would have to agree to. The property owner has to agree to a performance, a loan guarantee, then also a promissory note. The company has to agree to a limited waiver of confidentiality with their employment security information that they send to the state. And then finally, and this is a new change, I wasn't aware of it, Steve, you may be aware of it from your work, but Commerce now is strongly encouraging municipalities to take a deed of trust on the property where the promissory note comes from. That gives you added leverage. I sent all of these agreements to Regulator and told them that my goal would be for them to respond back as to whether or not they were going to be able to sign off on all of these by the end of April so that we could submit the grant documentation back to Commerce in early May. I did point out to them the deed of trust, and I'll let you know what their thoughts are on that. I know they take a lot of pride in the way that they operate business, and they may not take too kindly to having a deed of trust on their property. And if that's the case, then maybe we can talk to the town attorney about an alternative way to secure the promissory note. But anyway, we're very excited, 32 new jobs to a company that already has 155 employees is terrific news for the community.
Great people.
I might add, they do so much for this
Oh my
community.
God.
Oh, they do.
Maybe I'm the only one on the finance committee, but I'll send that on.
Good. Otherwise, we did for a while. They don't get back to Wednesday.
Well, Elton's on it, but he's out also.
Yeah. We phoned him in.
By the way, how's Elton doing?
Doing it.
Okay, with that recommendation to send it forward, we have completed our agenda for our committee meetings for the month of March, and with that being done, we are ready to adjourn, and I'll entertain a motion to that effect.
So moved.
All in favor, aye? We are adjourned. Thanks again for coming out tonight, we appreciate it. Good to hear from you.